12. Why do you offer allegiance to a king who has betrayed you? They were at a clearing now, far into Strathclyde. Osric had not wanted to open her eyes as they fled Caeligwylid. Flames and Eric had ridden the chestnut mare by only cold moonlight, as she clung onto her clothes and sword. Now, as day broke, they had stopped by a river. Eric Thurgilson had stripped himself of all his clothes and immersed himself in it as Osrath looked around her, wondering where they were. North, of course. But where? Would this land take them to Dunnottar? How long would that take? Longer than if she travelled alone, Osric knew. Had her benevolence in asking for his freedom cost Domhnall his crown after all? For, there was no doubt that Geric was planning an alliance with Cumbraland to overthrow him in the depths of winter. A plan, that was what they needed. But Eric had not shared his own plan, and Osric suspected she knew what he sought. Or, rather, who. She heard splashing, which suggested the Northman was emerging from the water, and she glanced to check she was right, as he unfolded more underclothing from his leather breeches. Finoli. How much she had wanted to see him since he had disappeared at Dara. The longing had slowly faded, until recently when, if her mind flicked to him, she would be hoping in an abstract way that he was safe, that he thrived. And so, it seemed, he was safe and thriving in Caeligwylid. How much she did want to see her best friend again, spend time with him, talk, laugh as they used to. You wished to stay, said Eric's voice by her shoulder. Osric turned round, and nodded. There was not time, she replied. He risked a good deal for me as I once risked a good deal for him. Eric nodded, clipping his belt around his waist. Then, Osric turned, looking at the clean Northman. It was often said they bathed more than Saxons, and certainly more than Scots. Though he had told her he came from a far colder place than Northumbria, still he bathed where Saxon, Cymry and Scot resisted. His hair was unbound, and he was using a bone comb to smooth it around his shoulders. You, he said, holding out his hands. Not sure of his meaning, she handed him the clothes Finoli had given to her. Eric placed them on the ground, then held out his hands again. You wash, he clarified. But Osric shrank back, as she tried to hide body inside the cloak for shame of what had become of it. And how? Eric lowered his eyes. I will not look, if that is your worry. But, if you would have me help you, it may be easier. Slowly, he took a step forward, and Drew put her arms. Ugly, congealed gashes were stuck to the once beautiful silk dress. Osric looked away. What they did was not honorable. He got what he deserved. Finoli is a magnificent fighter. You miss him, your friend. Yes. Osric looked back to Eric, as he carefully lowered her arms. He was once Domhnall's man, the king, but his king betrayed him, I'm guessing. Eric's face looked grim. His lover betrayed him, in order to be king. And you wish to go back. This king did the same to you. He may have, Osric conceded, considering the water. But I swore an oath. It would be cold. But, at least she would be rid of Caeligwylid. Stay with us. If it's fighting you want. Osric smiled, hoping he thought she was grateful for his suggestion. In all honesty, she was. And now, he had confirmed his plan. I couldn't do the rest, Osric admitted. Not ravage women, not murder children, not take pennies from people who are already poor, steal their cattle, burn their homes. Pity. You could teach the upstart pups of our a few things. Osric shook her head. I am of Cumbraland and Northumbria, Alba. I would be attacking her own people. She looked at Eric. I thank you. Ha. Osric smiled at the Northman's grin as she began to untie her cloak. The air was cold, grey clouds were accumulating. Get back to Domhnall and tell him the ally he thought he had in Griogr actually desires the throne for himself. She remembered that part. The usurper, as Geric, had let it slip when he was mauling her cunt. Unless he was dead. She would have to see his corpse to believe that. Eric helped her peel off the fabric where it had dried to her skin with blood, throwing the remnants of cloth onto a fire that he had begun. He had not sought to molest her. Indeed, his fingers had been light, efficient, methodical of task. It seemed a measure of respect. Osrith could trust him, for now. And she had his bargain to consider. As Eric turned and made his way to the horse, she walked over the hard earth and into the water, anticipating the coldness. The water stung her injuries and she gasped at the temperature. At least, that was what she told herself, as water swirled around her calves, her thighs, waist, neck. Eric was busying himself with the horse's leather straps, his back to her as she pulled ferns from the moorland hedgerow that was growing beside the water to clean the dirt from her skin. More she used on her hair, and she blushed for shame to see her own body, clean, naked, damaged. "I am not dressed yet," Osrith warned the Northman as he made to turn to her, and she put her hands to her chest in alarm as she emerged from the lake. He knew she could fight, if he was thinking to overpower her, and Osrith had glimpsed the wounds she had given the Norseman on the battlefield as he had emerged from his bathe. In his hands, however, the Northman was holding strips of cloth. He waited patiently as she pulled her cloak to her. "You look like a woman, you have tits." He cupped his hand over his own chest. "That will distract a man, but not for long, and then you are really in trouble. Take off your cloak." Osrith gave him a look, and did not move. "I will do nothing, except show you something." He offered the cloth to Osrith. "While I am Norse, and am everything you describe a Norseman to be. Thief, murderer, rapist. I do not wish more shame to come to you." He looked at her face as he proffered the bindings, holding out a hand. Osrith remained as she was. "You gave me the choice of freedom. I have an obligation." "A geese," Osrith said. "An obligation. One formed with a magical being." Domhnall was not the only man she sought at Dunnottar. "You are every bit a warrior as I, woman, better than many Saxons or Britons." "I am a Briton, and an Angle," Osrith retorted as he placed the clean pieces of cloth beside her shirt. "I am a Gaelish warrior. And every bit as clean as a Norseman or Dane." Eirik Thorgilson grinned at that, placing the binding strips upon Bué before turning and busying himself with the horse's straps. Osrith stood up, easing off her thin wool covering, and spent the next minutes trying to loop them around herself. It was no good. "Stop being a gentleman and show me how to do this, then," Osrith declared. "Nagabdra, I will pull your intestines out of your ass if you try anything." When Eirik turned, he saw her. Osrith was standing, naked, arms outstretched. He had seen her naked before, in the moonlight when she was being molested, and had tried not to look. However, there was no avoiding her body now. "I will try not to harm your injuries," he said, as he strode over, putting his hand to her right breast. Osrith gasped. She had made a mistake, she was sure. He was going to push her down and force himself into her, but the Northman placed one end of cloth under her breast and drew up her hand to hold it in place. "You were very brave to endure what he did to you. You should turn, on the spot," he added, and when Osrith turned, the cloth pulled her breasts inwards. It was not as uncomfortable as Osrith had imagined. Already she had more agility in her upper body. Each day pull it in a little tighter, not so much you can't breathe. Our women do this, to stop weapons getting in the way. Eirik put his hands on her waist. "For your hips, nothing can be done, padding on your waist. A long jerkin perhaps." He carefully wrapped the last of the linen around waist, efficiently and matter-of-factly, as if binding the leg of a lame horse. "Done," he concluded, looking away, before stopping and turning back, eyes on the bundle of clothes Finoli had pressed to her before their flight. He handed it to her. Osrith blushed a little at his show of honor. Around them, snow began to fall. Osrith realized it was her shirt, her clothes, given to her by Domhnall, which Finoli had made the effort to launder. She missed her friend. Then, she saw the roll of cloth, which must have been in the very center of the clothes, and her heart lurched. Finoli had sent them with food. Eirik had, meanwhile, taken up her cloak and was rubbing the end of it with more fern. "It will dry as we ride," he said. as a now fully dressed Osrith appeared beside him. "You have a good body," Eric said approvingly, as he helped Osrith onto the horse. "Very nice." He pushed with effort to mount, too. The horse moved her back legs for stability as Eric shifted in the saddle behind her. "I don't care," replied Osrith, pulling the woolen cloak around her shoulders as Eric reached past her and to the reins. His body was warm, a thing for which Osrith was grateful as more snow began to tumble from the dark, grey sky. "You have good hands. I didn't fall off this blessed horse." She was getting better, but Osrith knew she would never be comfortable on a horse. Eric was about to set off, but stopped, and Osrith found her hair being pulled. She saw Eric's hand and the comb he had used for his long, fair hair. A comb through her hair. "That man, Griogr, caught you up by the hair," the Norseman said, smoothing through his comb, "when he was pulling you to the dungeon. He worked over her scalp, drawing all the strands together. I have seen many men pulled by their hair in battle, to their end." The comb snagged, and Eric extracted something from Osrith's hair. He placed it in her palm. It was the silver hair slide, his, with the moon-like pearl set into it. The one she had used to free the cell door and the gate. "It is fine," Osrith agreed. "It is yours," Eric said, quietly. "Both the silver and jewel came from your land, and was worked by a blacksmith there." His deft fingers braided her hair into one short bunch and he pushed the piece into it. "Here," Osrith returned. "How did you get bread, woman?" Osrith glanced over her shoulder and took it back. Eric sighed. "Warrior," he emphasized. "Anglish, Gaelish pain in the ass?" Osrith grinned, pushing a generous portion into his hand. "Osrith," she said. "Of Northumbria. You may call me that." "Eric Thurgilson," the Norseman said, "of Jogvin." He took a bite of the dark loaf. "Finoli." Osrith sighed. She couldn't help it. Bewildered for most of the night that her friend had appeared, this was now giving way to a feeling of contentment. Osrith had managed to help him, and he lived well as a monk. "You have true friend," Eric said, as he turned the horse back to the snow-covered path. Osrith's mind went to her friend, one long braid down his back, soft, brown eyes, arm as steel. And there, before her waking eyes, as if going on in front, Osrith could see the four of them, her, Fergus, Finoli, and, riding together. They were all Domhnall's men, had sworn to him. She would go to Alba. Wait. Eric drew the horse to a stop. She turned round as much as she could to look at the Northman's face. It was likely she had little choice anyway, for what Osrith was about to say, the Norseman may have decided to do, anyway. But it was important she said it. "I agree to your terms. I agree," she swallowed. "For safe passage to Dunnottar, I would show you the way." She held out a hand. Eric said nothing. He stared at her, and her hand. Then roared a laugh, grasping her hand with both of his own. "To honor of battle, Osrith," he declared, then moved the leather straps in his hands and reined the horse on.